Hello and welcome. This is the full interview with Karen Reed, Alan Jackson, and Boston 25. I will leave the link to the full interview in the description below if you would like to watch it or listen to it without my commentary. Thank you for being here.
Full disclosure, we invited you here, but of course it is unusual for someone who's accused of murder to do this interview or others. Why do you want to speak to the people of Massachusetts and beyond?
I have nothing to hide. My life is in the balance, and it shouldn't be. And I believe sunlight is the best disinfectant, and that's been our team motto since inception. I think the more I've seen, the more information the public has, the more they understand what we already know.
And when we talk about the public, there's so much going on in the atmosphere of this case. How much of that do you pay attention to?
I pay attention a little bit to everything. The parts of the public that seem a little dirtier than others, I have close friends and people I trust that filter through it, because there are threads of important information in every channel of the public, on social media, just out and about in Norfolk County or in Suffolk, through our emails. So what I can't manage or don't want to manage, we have a lot of it covered from people that we trust and people who support us.
People said some pretty nasty things about you online. Do you read that? Do you process that?
I read some of it. I don't take it to heart, but it's bothersome. But I understand why it is. There are bad, evil, nefarious players in this. There are people who are adverse to other people in this whole case, people who support me. And I've known my whole life, as does everyone, that there's not a lot of good in some people. And it doesn't drag me down in any way. It makes me feel like we're covering ground here. The nastier it gets, the more I know that we're making an impact to people that have a lot to worry about.
And that's excellent for her to say that they're making an impact for people who have a lot to worry about. And I fully agree with her. I've said this in multiple videos. The McCabe's, the Alberts, the MSP, Brian Higgins, and Michael Morrissey, his entire office. Every single one of those corrupt individuals have a lot to worry about. You can't unsee the corruption that we have all seen paying attention to this case. It's the desperate fools, the desperate corrupt fools like the McCabe's, especially Jennifer McCabe, who think that they can just keep gaslighting us about the facts of the case. Once you understand the facts of the case, you cannot unsee the facts of the case. So it's futile for them, the corrupt, nasty, evil individuals in the Karen Reed case, to keep attempting to cover up their cover up, you know? It's just pure desperation, and it's going to be all for naught. The world knows. Again, 80 to 90% of people online around the world know that Karen Reed is not guilty. So the more Michael Morrissey fights to cover up his cover-up, the more the MSP fights to cover up their cover-up, the more Canton PD fights to cover up their cover-up, and the McCabe's and the Alberts and Higgins, the more all of them fight foolishly to cover up what is already known to be a cover-up, the more they are wasting their own time, their own energy. It's pointless. You know, at this point, it would serve them better to just tell the truth, because they are not convincing anyone.
3 years have now passed since John's death. How much do you think about him with everything else that is going on?
I think about him in terms of his final his final days, his final weeks. I mean, we have his cell phone, which a cell phone to anyone is like a diary, and it tracks everything you've done. And I've gone over and over his final movements, his heart rate, his injuries, the time that he did everything that day and the days leading up to it. But I've said this to other people. The time that I spent with John, 2 years, it's now been 3 since he's gone, since he was killed. And I'm a year beyond. I've eclipsed the time that I spent with him. And I have very mixed feelings, when I look back on John, because I see a lot of poor decisions that were all precursors to his death and to this nightmare that I'm living. It's
Poor decisions by whom?
by both of us. Just drinking, being around the wrong people is chief among them. Wrong people for the weeks leading up. They wouldn't have been people I would have chosen on my own to be around.
Excellent. Excellent and beautifully spoken by Karen Reed, that she's not going to be walked all over. She knows who the culprits are, and no matter how much they try to target her and pin this all on her, she's not going to back down. And that it wasn't even her choice to be around them. And if you consider John O'Keefe's position as a Boston police officer and Brian Albert's position as a lead role in the Boston Police Department at the time of John's death, this is normal. This is commonplace for police officers and their families to commingle, to hang out, to go to bars, to party after work and on the weekends, right? So from the surface looking in, John O'Keefe and Karen Reed were hanging out with other members of law enforcement the night that John O'Keefe was murdered, right? And if those members of law enforcement had any real integrity, none of this would have ever happened to Karen Reed, right? So it's clear just from that point of view that John O'Keefe and Karen Reed were around the wrong people. Because had they been around the right people, this may have happened to John O'Keefe and it may have been an accident, but they would have all fessed up to it. Not one of them would have pointed the finger at Karen Reed, the only one who didn't have a dog in the fight, the only one who wasn't even there when John O'Keefe was murdered, right? So I'm just saying, Karen Reed is strong, and it's an inspiration, and there's a lesson here, a deep lesson here to all of us, that you should absolutely be discerning about the people you choose to hang around with, especially if you work with them, and especially if they are in positions of power, because so often people who are drawn to positions of power have a narcissistic and abusive element to their personality. Just look it up. It is so often true that CEOs themselves have narcissistic traits, right? So I'm saying pick your company carefully. Pick your friends carefully, because you might just end up like Karen Reed, and it might sound far-fetched, but it's not. It's not. The people you surround yourself with could mean the difference between you living a great quality of life, an excellent social life that nourishes you and helps you in your own personal life, or the difference of being oppressed, being accused of a murder, for crying out loud, like sometimes your friends are not your friends, and you don't learn that until hard times come, And unfortunately, Karen Reed had to learn that the hard way, in the worst way. So I'm saying we might all want to look at this case from that perspective as well. Choose your company wisely, because you are the company you keep.
Have you been able to start a new social life, a new dating life since this?
No, I have my friends that were always in my life. I'm closer to them than ever. And it's been kind of a bittersweet silver lining is I don't know that I ever would have known my friends and family had this in them to be there for me in this way. So I feel very fortunate. And I've met so many new people. And that's enough of a life for me right now is, we go out for dinner just to get out, and we end up just kind of hungered down over a table discussing the case. And I value their input, and I'm content with my social life, even though it's really just socializing about the case.
How big is Karen Reed's inner circle?
My inner circle, half of it's my attorneys, who we just talk so much. There's always so much ground to cover, and we can't wait until trial starts to really begin strategizing or going through the details. We do a little bit every day.
You do a lot every day.
I should say we do a little bit.
And you may have heard that parallel audio going on in the background of Karen Reed's voice. I believe it was this recording itself, like an error, a glitch in the recording.
In proportion to the total task at hand, but we cover a lot of hours every day. I probably talk to Alan and Liza each 3 or 4 times a day. And I think it makes us all feel good that we're going to be that much more prepared when we have to do this for round 2. But my inner circle, I don't know. It's bigger than it was. It's bigger than it was before, but it feels stronger than it ever was. I know that I can trust the people that I chose to have in my life.
Is that 5, 10?
10 maybe.
Okay.
Really, really tight, it's probably 5.
Alan, have you ever had...
And that's another great point to observe here, that the McCabe's and the Alberts had a large group of friends and family whom they would all associate with. But notice how corrupt they are. Notice how nasty and terrible they are as human beings, even though they have a greater quantity of people they associate with. And I am telling you from my own personal experience, and of course from looking at this Karen Reed case, that, when it comes to friends, when it comes to loved ones, people whom you appoint as your family, whether they're related by blood or not, it should always be quality over quantity. My inner circle is extremely small, and I have had better mental health for that reason. I don't know what it is for some people that they feel like they have to have, hundreds of friends, and of course the online parasocial relationships. People assume that they're all friends because they've friended each other on, social media platforms. But, I'm telling you, it's not quantity, it is quality. And to me, Karen Reed is wise to keep her inner circle small. Even with all her fame with this case, the high profile nature of this case, and again, the parasocial relationships from people who want to be closer to her, people who want to show support, for Karen Reed to say, like, the closest people in her life are probably 5 people. She's got at least 60,000 people on that Facebook group who want her to win, who want to see her win this case, So, and I'm sure that a lot of those people view her as a friend, or view her as someone they respect and they look up to, and I'm just saying, like, but at the end of the day, you don't have to befriend everyone who supports you. You don't. It's wiser to keep your inner circle small and close. And I'm telling you, it will protect your mental health for the better.
a client who's advocated for themselves as much as Karen does?
Not as articulately or as intelligently as Karen does. Karen is an innocent woman falsely accused. She could sit back and say, go handle this. You're the professionals, go deal with it. That is not in her personality. And we're a better team for it. She has an encyclopedic knowledge of literally every single page of the discovery. I've never seen anything like it. She has an analyst's brain. She's got a rapier intelligence that is attendant to this type of analysis. Very, very smart, very motivated. She has no off button. I'm getting texts. I wake up, I'm on the West Coast. So I wake up, she's been awake for 3 hours. And nearly every day, I feel like, damn it, I fall.
And if you guys aren't aware, there is currently a 3-hour difference between Massachusetts and California, where Alan Jackson resides. And at some points of the year, there was a 2-hour difference, because of the freaking changing of clocks, what have you. So anyway, I just wanted to clarify that if you weren't aware, right now in February of 2025, there's a 3-hour difference. And that's what Alan Jackson is referring to, that by the time he's awake, Karen Reed has been awake for 3 hours due to the time zones.
And back again. I've fallen behind again. Liza and I have to sort of get back on the treadmill and catch up with where Karen is today, because she'll literally just pick something out of the blue. To me, it's out of the blue. To her brain, it makes sense for her to pull this document or pull this report and say, well, have we thought about this paragraph or this sentence or this word in this report here or there? And then we gather together as a team, me and David and Liza and Karen will get on the phone and talk it through. So she's been, more than any other client I've ever seen, any other client I've ever met, she's been at the center of her own defense. She knows she didn't do this. She's motivated to make sure that the truth comes out.
Has she made any seminal decisions in this case? Have we seen any filings that are directly from her decision and her thought process of how things should play out?
The better question is, have we seen any filings that she didn't have a seminal investment in, a decision about, a suggestion about? Every single thing that you've ever seen filed in this case has gone through Karen, at least some of them are hyper legal, right? But she's educated herself on, she'd make a better lawyer than most lawyers these days. But she will have an impact.
That's excellent. And as I've told you guys in past videos, I have followed countless cases over the years, and I have learned legal language. And I don't know all of it. There's still stuff I come across and I'm like, what? What is that? What's that Latin word? And then I educate myself about it so that I'm a better communicator about the things I'm passionate about. So I commend Karen Reed. I know the feels. You really want to get down to understanding something. You are going to do the research. You are going to educate yourself so that you have a better understanding. And that's exactly what I do on this channel. I commend Karen Reed for being wise, intelligent, and persistent enough to carry some of the navigation here, to be behind the wheel in some aspects of her own defense. Good job, Karen Reed.
And she's got a seat at the table in terms of strategy and tactics that we use every single day.
There are so many people who have never met you, but are so invested in your life and the outcome of this case. I know there are some who adamantly support you, but do you ever worry about your safety with the people who do not want to see you succeed in this case?
I did more earlier on. I feel more insulated now. I feel safer that people know. Because if anything ever happened to me or someone that I love, I think a lot of people would know where to look. So that makes me feel safer.
Have you received...
That's a really good point to make. Again, the high profile nature of this case means a lot of the world is watching it, and a lot of the world wants to see it through. A lot of us want to see Karen Reed walk free, right? So she's absolutely correct. She's and Ted for asking her the question in the first place, that there's a huge following for Karen Read from people all over the world, and they all want closure from this blatantly obvious corruption. So it's excellent. And guys, I also want to say to point out this interview. I have not covered many Karen Read interviews. I've maybe covered 2 on my channel within the last 7 or 8 months. I just don't like interviews that are more for propaganda, more for sensationalism than they are for actually informing the public about the case. Namely, Court TV. I've stopped watching Court TV because of how they mistreated Karen Read, because of their disinformation about the Karen Read case. And I've stopped watching other networks as well for the same reason. So I just want to say, and Boston 25 has not been innocent. They have done interviews that were a bit sensationalized. But this specific interview to me is excellent because it's allowing Karen Read and her defense team to speak up, and the questions to me are fair. So it's excellent. It's an insightful interview, and I commend Karen Read for agreeing to this interview.
Any credible threats?
Yep, I have. There's been some online that just the fact that someone's brazen enough to even post something like that gives you some insight into their stability or lack thereof.
People showing up at your house, calling your private cell phone?
No, that has not. I've really not had my physical boundaries impinged in any way, nor have my parents. I think by and large, very large, there are very friendly people all around me.
Again, 80 to 90% of people who have been paying attention to the Karen Read case know that Karen Read is not guilty. She is factually not guilty. So it makes sense to me that in her personal life, outside of the case, there isn't really anyone messing with her or her family. Because again, 80 to 90% of people know that she's innocent, that Karen Read is being framed by the DA's office in Norfolk County in Massachusetts, right? So if anyone is going to mess with her or her family, we all know who it will be, right? It's going to be that 10 to 20% of trolls. It's going to be any member of the corrupt individuals who framed her in the first place. We all know.
Defense strategy is the most aggressive I've ever seen in a case. You've taken on the DA, you've taken on the judge. How much of that is Karen Read? How much is that the team?
Probably equal parts. The defense strategy comes down to probably 3 or 4 words. Get the truth out. That's the defense strategy. It may be more aggressive than you're used to. The conduct in this case is more dire than I'm used to. I've seen a lot of cases. I've been doing this for 30 years. I don't think I've ever seen a case with as many questions, as many suspect actions, and as much suspect conduct as I've seen in this case. There is unequivocally corruption in this case. There are absolutely cover-ups in this case. There's conduct by law enforcement and the DA's office, that the likes of which I've never seen. And my job, our job as a team, is to get that truth out. I'm not going to sit idly by. Our team is never going to sit idly by and let an innocent woman be convicted based on false evidence, false pretenses, cover-ups, agreements and decisions on the other side to hamstring the defense, hamstring our ability to get the truth out. I'm not going to sit idly by to do that. So is it aggressive? Sure, it's aggressive. But a woman's life is in the balance. So yeah, we're going to stay aggressive. We've been aggressive. We're going to stay aggressive until the truth comes out.
I think it was 4 words at the end of the last trial, and it was, I'm going to declare a mistrial. What was that like for you to take in?
It was the outcome that I had thought about the least. I had thought about the best case scenario, and I always think about the worst because that's how I'm able to process. I have to think it through. How will I deal with this? Who will fight for me if I'm not sitting here to fight for myself? And of course, I thought about an acquittal because I know I deserve it. I had not really thought about a mistrial. It was only a couple days. It was like day 2, the end of day 2 into the deliberations, that both David and Alan told me separately when we were in the church next door that this could be a mistrial. And the prospect of that at that time during jury deliberations was a gut punch. But then when it was declared, it was such relief that I was free. I was free to sleep in my own bed, hug my parents, continue to work on this case. My immediate next worry was, I hope I have my team available to go to battle all over again. But those moments, waiting to hear 12 strangers determine what is going to physically happen to you for the foreseeable future or forever, when you're able to walk out a free woman or man, it was an incredible relief. You just see your life it can just be taken away from you.
As we had.
And in my last video, I'm still covering the SJC's denial of the motion to dismiss. I think I'm on part 2. And in that part 2, I think I stated that we all saw Karen Reed's face when Judge Bev declared that mistrial. And I described it as a combination, a mixture of relief and fuck you, fuck you to the corrupt people in this case. Like I said in that video that I would be flipping the bird at the McCabe's and the Alberts, maybe even at Judge Bev. But Karen Reed, her face when the declaration of the mistrial was announced, it was relief and it was strength as well. And I want to talk about that strength because so often when people feel like they are up against a wall of oppression or corruption and they don't see a way out, it all feels endless and futile. It's human nature to cower away and, put your head in the sand and cry like, woe is me. And I may as well just give up because I'm up against such a powerful interdepartmental systemic force that wants to lock me up. But here is Karen Reed showing her strength, that she will stand up. She will have her strong backbone and just bring it on, like she's ready for the next round 2, It's just, that's a level of strength that to me, very few people have. And I commend her for it.
To the second trial, one of the possible outcomes here could be a conviction. That could be prison time. How much have you thought about that?
I think about it every day, about prison time, and it doesn't frighten me the way it did 3 years ago. I was arrested 3 years ago tomorrow, and I've been in jail twice as a result of this prosecution. I've now accepted the fact that what's happening to me and the awareness this case has raised and the eyes it's opened, that is what my purpose is in Massachusetts and whatever effect this has in other parts of the country. And even if a jury got it wrong or there's even more nefarious behavior on behalf of this prosecution, then just even more awareness will be raised. So I can accept whatever happens. Nothing will ever get the best of me or or break me down.
There have been sort of these unsubstantiated claims in the atmosphere that there might have been some funny business with the jurors who were dismissed.
Right.
Is this a real concern that you have? Is this something that you are looking at, or have you just dismissed it as rumor?
I'll never just dismiss that as rumor. Something like that is, it's too convenient for the prosecution for us to just dismiss out of hand. Do I have any evidence, specific evidence, that there was jury tampering? I don't have any specific evidence of it. Do I think that there are questions that should be asked? Do I think that there are questions that have been raised about the way the jurors were dismissed, and who was dismissed very specifically? There were jurors who very, very clearly throughout, it's impossible to sit 8 feet away from 12 or 15 folks and not get an idea, just a chemistry idea of where those jurors are one way or the other based on certain, body language and facial expressions, etc., size and huffs and arm folds and leaning forward, leaning back, things of that nature based on certain witnesses. It's interesting that 3 of probably the most stalwart jurors who we believed, and I will go to my grave believing, were very supportive of the defense, ended up cast aside within minutes, not days or hours, within minutes of the jurors deliberating. Within minutes of me standing up and giving my final summation, those 3 jurors were gone. So is that a query? Absolutely. Have I dismissed it? I'll never dismiss it. Is there anything to do about it? Not so sure.
And if you remember the interviews that Aidan Kearney conducted with the jurors post-trial, those interviews were revealing. However, all of those jury members wanted to remain anonymous for the most part, with the exception of one. He was willing to tell us his sex. He was willing to say what he did for a living. So, I think following the publishing of his interview with Aidan Kearney, probably the people surrounding him knew that he spoke up as a juror. But on top of that, I just want to say, the Alan Jackson's legal argument here is that he doesn't have evidence that there was jury tampering, even with the jury interviews that Aidan Kearney conducted. It's going to take the jury members coming forward and disclosing their identity to tell the world what really went down during deliberations. And a lot of them are not willing to do that because, again, of the high-profile nature of this case. And I do not fault them. I do not fault the jury members for not being honest. The only people I fault for not being honest or not being willing to put themselves out there are the McCabe's, the Alberts and Higgins, and the MSP and Canton PD and the DA's office. And of course, the prosecutors themselves, who know damn well that the pieces don't fit, that actually pieces were deleted or destroyed or manipulated. Okay, I give all of those liars shit for being liars and for continuing to protect themselves and their friends, and despite an innocent woman possibly facing prison time because of their cowardice, Like, Brian Higgins is a coward. I said it before. Brian Albert is a coward. All right? And I will hold that against them until they fess up and tell the truth. But the jurors not willing to show their faces or show who they are to the world in order to disclose the corruption that occurred during deliberations, I do not fault them. Even though there are 10 to 20% of people who think Karen Read is guilty because they're ill-informed or too ignorant to follow the evidence, any one of those people, any one of that 10 to 20% could cause harm to the jury members. Absolutely, those jury members would be putting themselves in harm's way, trying to blow the whistle as jury members. So, it's difficult. it's a difficult thing. It's complicated, but I understand why Alan Jackson said he doesn't have evidence, even though to me, those jury interviews are plenty of evidence enough.
State troopers who was involved with the Norfolk DA's office and on the periphery of the investigation was also responsible for the jury?
Right. He wasn't that far on the periphery of the investigation. He was involved in the investigation. He was a direct supervisor over the individuals that were testifying and and about whom we had leveled some very, very serious claims and ended up proving those claims during the course of direct and cross-examination, the presentation of our case. That person, that supervisor, we found out well into the trial. As a matter of fact, at the end of the trial, we found out is the very person who was governing the jurors. That's a question that should be raised. That is an issue that should be teased out. Should never, ever happen. That is the very definition of a conflict of interest.
Is that standard in Massachusetts for just the DA's office to assign whoever they want to go be the sort of,
supervisor
of the jury? Yeah.
Yeah. Is it standard in Massachusetts? I hope not. I've never seen that in my life. But if I had a nickel for every time I said I've never seen this in my life as it pertains to the Massachusetts justice system, the criminal justice system, I'd have a lot of nickels. I've never seen that happen. It should never have happened.
And guys, if you really want to know what Alan Jackson is talking about, I have two really good documentaries you should look up. They are both on Netflix. One is called Trial 4, in which another person was framed for another Boston police officer's death. And the other documentary is How to Fix a Drug Scandal. They are both on Netflix, and they both pertain to the corrupt, broken system in Massachusetts.
It's abhorrent to the system of justice in which we work. Those kinds of conflicts of interest, they just can't stand. But they did. And we weren't even told about it. I mean, that was one of the most galling parts of that revelation is.
So you see, guys, like that the DA's office in Norfolk County, Michael Morrissey, was able to have a supervisor herding the jury, sheep herding the jury. Like the jury members were in Michael Morrissey's control through that supervisor. It was absolutely a conflict of interest when the prosecuting powers have control and oversight of the jury members, right? And again, if you read or listened to those jury interviews that Aidan Kearney conducted, the foreman and the other guy who was like some kind of scientist, they both dictated what was and what was not possible to the other members of the jury, like it's as if those two guys were like, well, we're in positions, one's a doctor, one's a scientist, whatever. And we're in positions of expertise here. And we're telling the rest of you jury members that we know what we're talking about. So, count 2, count 1, count 3, like they were dictating what was and wasn't factual. And as a jury, you are supposed to work together. There isn't supposed to be one person saying he knows more than you, right? It's supposed to be a jury of Karen Reed's peers, right? Of anyone in the public. And each member of the jury is supposed to have an equal opportunity to argue the facts of the case in order to come to their decision. And in one of the Aidan Kearney interviews with the juror said that he felt pressured. He felt intimidated. All right. So again, for Michael Morrissey, the prosecutor, the DA, to have a supervisor intimately involved with the jury process in the Karen Reed case absolutely needs to be looked at.
Wait. This has been happening under our nose the entire trial, and I'm just now finding out about it? We would have made hay about it as soon as we found out, and we did. But it was 10 minutes before I was about to stand up and close the case.
Some of the things that Michael Proctor said about you were objectively vicious. What was it like to be there in court and listen to all those texts?
Another relief. So many moments in court were a relief to me because I've known these things in some cases for years and had to keep it amongst our inner circle. Nothing Michael Proctor texted and admitted out loud in court about me would ever offend me. I'm proud of my overcoming of health crises. Proctor was just letting the public know what I've known about Michael Proctor, who he really is. And it's just luck that, as I know it, Michael Proctor doesn't have a daughter. But those text messages, as vile as they are, I think are the least of his offenses.
Alan, you could have.
Excellent. And it's quite a display of Karen Reed's strong mental health for her to stand in her confidence and in her authenticity and to say, yeah, he said a lot of terrible things about me, Michael Proctor did. But those things are more of a reflection of Michael Proctor's character than they have anything to do with me, right? Like, excellent mental health. Karen Reed has excellent mental health and strength and confidence. Like, that is real confidence. Someone who isn't fazed by the hatred that someone else projects on them. Karen Reed just deflects it back. She doesn't even give it back to him. She just lets it bounce off of her and back to him. And she's absolutely correct. All those nasty words Michael Proctor said about innocent Karen Reed, it was all a reflection of how shitty of a person, of a human being Michael Proctor is. And I absolutely agree with the online community that Michael Proctor's wife should spend less time defending him than she has. You know, if I were married to him, I would not be defending his ass. You know, I'd say roast his ass, you know, like hell no. You know, like Michael Proctor and his wife, they are birds of a feather. Clearly, they're living in an alternate reality, and I do not envy them. You know, they need far more help. They need far more soul searching than Karen Reed will ever need.
Had Michael Proctor read one or two of the text. You spent hours having him read those out loud. I'm sure that was done by design.
It was. Everything that we did in that cross-examination of Michael Proctor was done by design. I wanted to make sure that I had an audience of 12 folks, an undefined 12 folks sitting in that jury box who were going to make a judgment about, not just about Karen Reed, they were going to make a judgment about the prosecution and about the investigating.
You know, I also want to point out that there were plenty of comments about those Michael Proctor texts online. Plenty of people, especially males, plenty of males commented about those Michael Proctor text messages as if this is how police officers talk to one another. This is how law enforcement socializes behind the scenes. There isn't anything really mind-blowing about what Michael Proctor said, because this is how men behave behind the scenes, you know, and it's just an inside look into what goes down. But I'm still saying, no, it's not every man. I've known plenty of men. It's not every man that does that. It is a certain kind of man that acts like that behind the scenes. Michael Proctor is that certain kind of man. And if you are that certain kind of man, you also need soul searching. You know, this is what I'm talking about. Like, don't just blindly accept something just because it's socially acceptable in your inner circle. You know, like, pick your company wisely, pick your friends wisely. Don't just go along with something because it's the norm in your inner circle or it's the norm among your peers, you know? Michael Proctor is a shithead. So if you're condoning that kind of shittery, that's also a reflection of who you are.
Officer in charge of the prosecution or in charge of the investigation. They needed to see and hear the full panoply of who this person really is and get down to the fabric of the human being. That's the only way they could assess the veracity of the entire investigation. As goes the investigating officer, goes the investigation. And the prosecution, the Commonwealth, wanted to hide that. They wanted to mask it. They didn't want to give those data over to us. They didn't want to give those texts to us. They tried mightily in front of the court to get those suppressed. Why? Because as goes the investigator, goes the prosecution. The texts were vile. They were disgusting. They were not just, as Michael Proctor tried to slough them off, regrettable. Regrettable, Mr. Proctor? Seriously? That's the best you can come up with in terms of what the things that you're saying and the bias that you're showing about a criminal defendant and accused who has yet to be convicted of anything? That's the best you can say is it's regrettable. It's far beyond regrettable. It's disgusting. It's disturbing. That man should not ever carry a badge. That man should not ever carry a gun.
And Alan Jackson is proving my point. Like, that man, Michael Proctor, is disgusting. And anyone who sort of played down the shit he said also has problems. Again, I don't care if there are 50 men who talk like that in your group or 50 women like that who talk like that in your group. Just because it's normal in your group does not mean it's okay. And that's what I'm saying, guys. Like, the Karen Read case is a warning to everybody. Like, fuckery was normal with the McCabe's and the Alberts and Higgins and the MSP. Do not let fuckery be normal in your life.
Should never have any authority over the community members ever again.
Are you surprised that he's been fighting for his job?
Yeah. What I think he should probably do is put his tail between his legs and get out of the jurisdiction and go find some other line of work, someplace where he can't hurt people.
How?
I 1000% stand behind that. I so agree with Alan Jackson, and I feel that way about so many people in the Karen Read case, including Michael Morrissey, Hank Brennan, Adam Lally, and Judge Bev. Absolutely. They all need to step down from their positions and find something else to do. A line of work that doesn't put other people in their path to be victimized again.
Will Michael Proctor play in the retrial?
Oh, he's going to play large in the retrial. They can't. The prosecution, I think, probably wants very badly to take some magic eraser, some pixie dust, and erase Michael Proctor from the minds of the public, and certainly not from the minds of the new jury who's going to come in and assess this case. They're not going to be able to do it, not as long as we're breathing. Michael Proctor is going to be a part of this case, whether he likes it or not.
Because they don't necessarily have to call him, but obviously you have a right to call him as a witness.
Correct, and we will. If they don't call him, we will. We're not going to allow the Commonwealth to hide the truth from the last jury or this upcoming jury.
He's touched everything. Everything.
There's no part of the case that he hasn't affected. No part of the case that he hasn't affected. He was in charge of the entire investigation. The personality and the character of the investigation is the personality and the character of Michael Proctor. They're one.
Excellent. Excellent. Yes. The personality, the normalcy of the corruption in the Karen Read case is the normalcy of corruption within Michael Proctor and Michael Morrissey. Absolutely.
And the same. And we'll make sure that that's disclosed to the jury.
The feds devoted a lot of time and resources investigating what happened here. We are now years removed from that, and there's been no action taken. Why is that?
Well, I don't know that there's been no action taken. We don't know about any action taken. There's lots of, it's like
But no indictments.
no indictments, but it's like looking at a duck on water, Ted. The duck is very still, it's very stable, but underneath the little flippers are going crazy. I don't know what's happening just beneath the surface. I don't know what's happening. I'm not privy to what the federal investigation is actually, where it's going or how far it's led to this point. I do know that they were seminal in providing us with information. And when I say us, it's important to note, providing both sides. They didn't pick a side or choose a side in this. They provided everything that they decided was disclosable. They provided to both sides. The Commonwealth decided they didn't want to use it. As a matter of fact, tried mightily to keep us from using it. Thank goodness cooler heads prevailed, and we were able to utilize much of what their investigation or what their disclosure consisted of. But if it hadn't been for them, the Commonwealth had been hiding evidence from us for years. And it wasn't until the federal investigation and revelation came to pass that we actually sort of were able to look behind the curtain, which is where we should have been looking in the first place. So it was central to our presentation of our defense.
Leah Foley.
Yeah, and again, guys, we all saw it. We all saw Judge Bev's bullshit. For her to be so careful to not let any of that shit in, or to not disclose to the jury who hired the ARCA experts. Like, it's just, again, it's all in favor of the prosecution. Like Judge Bev has stood behind the prosecution. It's so clear to anyone watching. There is some sort of like social hierarchy there between the McCabe's, the Alberts, Judge Bev, and Michael Morrissey, and Adam Lally, and the MSP. Like, they are all looking out for one another's backs. And again, for Judge Bev to know that there is a federal investigation, for Judge Bev to know that the FBI hired the ARCA experts, and for her to be so protective of that information because it, quote, would be too prejudicial, right? Like, it's such bullshit. Like, Karen Reed is being prejudiced by the bullshit investigation, that the prosecution and the MSP underwent, the non-investigation. Like, again, Judge Bev, she's never going to let down her corruption. None of us paying attention to this case are ever going to let her live it down. She is corrupt forever.
He will be the third U.S. attorney, as far as we know, who will at least touch this case.
Right.
Do you expect that having a new head of the U.S. Attorney's Office in Boston will change anything?
I don't know. I have been incredibly impressed with the U.S. Attorney's Office in terms of the leadership under Ms. Foley's predecessors. Joshua Levy was central in making certain decisions about what to disclose to us, where the investigation was going. Again, I don't know what the full parameters of the investigation are, but I can say that I was very, very happy with what they did and what they disclosed, trying to get the truth out previously, and I hope Ms. Foley does the same thing. I'm looking forward to her continuing the investigation. I hope she does.
When you look at the scope of the federal investigation and all the things that were done, you received 3,000 pages from that investigation. Are there other things that might have been done or have been done that you think that should also be turned over or could be turned over?
I don't know. Again, Ted, we're sort of operating a little bit in the blind because I don't know what the full contours of the federal investigation consist of. So it's not like I can say, oh, well, they did this, but I don't have that information. I don't know what this is. The only thing that I have is the information that they provided to both sides. And then we culled through it to decide, oh, okay, is this relevant to our case? And nearly every page of it was highly, highly relevant material.
One of the things that the federal government did was hire this outside accident reconstruction team who would have no vested interest in the outcome of this case. Right. How important was those two accident reconstructionists coming in saying no way, no how?
I cannot describe the gravity of those two witnesses. First of all, they were unassailable in terms of their credibility and their credentials. There was nobody who testified that was more credentialed to talk about the issues that were attendant to them than those two gentlemen, those two doctors, PhDs. The fact that we didn't hire them, they can't be considered hired guns by the prosecution. The fact that the Commonwealth didn't even know their name. They were completely independent third parties who did not know Karen Reed or this case, and they did not know that their assessment was attendant to Karen Reed or this case. Central to their testimony, completely credible. I can't describe the gravity of those two witnesses and the impact that it had on the trial and getting to the truth. And what they said echoed everything that we had been learning during the course of our investigation on the defense side, which is that car was not damaged by hitting the human body. It did not hit a person. And John O'Keefe was not injured by being hit by a vehicle. No way, no how. It didn't happen. As one of the witnesses testified, the physics don't lie. The science doesn't lie. The car...
Excellent. So beautiful. I love it. It's so validating. I fully understand why Karen Reed keeps smiling. And I felt the same way when I observed the two ARCA experts, like Alan Jackson said, the PhDs, like they were absolutely crucial to proving that Karen Reed did not do this. But again, because the jury members, the ones determining Karen Reed's fate at the end of the day, because they were not permitted to know that the FBI had hired those two PhDs to conduct real accident reconstruction, because the jury members did not know that, they did not know what to think of those two PhDs. And to me, Trooper Joe Paul should have never been permitted to testify on the stand. Like, where was the voir dire for Trooper Joe Paul? You know, where was the Daubert hearing for Trooper Joe Paul? How dare Judge Bev permit him to testify as a accident reconstructionist when he is furthest from being an accident reconstructionist? Those two ARCA experts were real accident reconstructionists. And it's so unfortunate and so angering that the jury were confused because of what Trooper Joe Paul was saying and what those two PhDs were saying. Like, they didn't know what to believe. And guys, Joe Paul set the bar so low, it was laughable. You know, so sad. Like, so many elements of that trial and of the half-assed investigation. It's so saddening and angering at the same time and frustrating.
Did not make contact with John O'Keefe. She didn't do this.
Karen, when the ARCA information came in that document dump, I guess, what was your emotion kind of reading what they decided?
I didn't really know the details of it until trial because I did not have the same access to those materials that the attorneys did because of the federal protective order. It was another moment, and there's been so many, that I realized, to put it mildly, how underhanded this prosecution is, that a district attorney can be privy to that accident reconstruction report and continue to pursue this case and not call Doctors Wolf and Rentschler.
Right, they have one job to do. They have one job to do, to seek the truth. They had this information in front of them. As Karen just said, why wouldn't they call them? They should have called them. Their only...
Absolutely. As the prosecuting force in Norfolk County, Michael Morrissey absolutely should have called those experts on the stand, you know, via Adam Lally. Absolutely. Again, guys, like, if there was any integrity at the DA's office, they would have bare minimum allowed the ARCA experts to testify on behalf of the prosecution. But what would happen then? The prosecution's case would be null and void. It would go out the window. That's why Michael Morrissey didn't want any of that information coming through. And that's why it had to be the defense team calling those ARCA experts to the stand. Michael Morrissey's corruption is forever, just like Judge Bev. Never gonna let it live down. All of us watching, our eyes are on the real culprits, and we know who they are.
Job is to seek the truth, not to seek a conviction. And the truth is, the physics don't lie. The car didn't hit John. He wasn't killed by being hit by a car. And they, not only did they not seek that truth, they tried to suppress it.
And their version of events was almost, it was laughable. It was laughable. It was illogical. It just did. The body just landed. The phone just landed. A side swipe with no bruises. It's not as if they had qualified, credentialed, advanced educated experts to offer another version of events. They didn't have that, and they chose to ignore that, and they chose to present to the court and to the public in a hearing that those federal materials, 3,000 pages, were 90 to 95% consistent with their theory of the case. The theory of the case is a car accident. The federal materials included a report that said there wasn't a car accident. That's the case. That's
Yeah, remember when Prosecutor McLaughlin said exactly what Karen Reed said, that 90% of the federal investigation coincides with the prosecution's narrative of what happened? McLaughlin, too. Again, all of those prosecutors, they are all full of shit. Like, and they are all gaslighting us. That there is no limit to where they will go to gaslight us. Crazy. Like, it's like I said about Hank Brennan. Like, it's like Hank Brennan will take the truth and he will call it a lie because he arrogantly and foolishly thinks that if he can call the truth a lie, it's a lie, even though all of us know it's the truth. Like, just the arrogance, the desperation, and the gaslighting among every single prosecutor in this case. It will all go down in history, you know, just the jaw-dropping corruption in this case. It will all go down in history, and every single prosecutor in Michael Morrissey's office should be afraid for their reputation. They're never going to get it back.
95% of the case. And it was inconsistent. It wasn't just inconsistent. It was diametrically opposed to the Commonwealth's theory of the case or lie of the case.
On the morning of January 29th, 2022, you said it was possible you might have hit John. How could that even be in the realm if you saw him going into the house?
Because it never crossed my mind that the people we were with, middle-aged adults with children, some of the children were with us that night at the bar. It did not cross my mind for several days that they did this to John, that John was treated like a piece of garbage. These were women and men, some I knew better than others, that I knew to be normal people. And I went through every possibility. He was near the road and he was dying. And I didn't think he was purposely put in that place.
In your opinion, there have been a few names that...
I get what Karen Reed is saying, you know, that initially... it's the furthest thing from her mind. She can't even conceptualize it. She's not even thinking that anyone in the house did this to John, because she's assuming that she's acquainted with these people and that because they have families and because they are also, some of them, members of law enforcement, that they would all do the right thing if that were the case, right? Like, again, and as I stated in previous videos, like Karen Reed is at that moment willing to take responsibility for John's death, because she's innocent, because she has nothing to hide, you know, because if she did this to him in her mind, she feels terrible about it. You know, she's not going to go hide and make up a lie. It's the whole like phrasing in her words, like, could I have hit him? And then how Jennifer McCabe and the other McCabes and the Alberts just twisted that, and the paramedics who are also in cahoots. The first responders who are now clearly in cahoots with those families. They all twisted her words to say, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him, when she never fucking said that. All she said was, could I have hit him, like an innocent person would? Someone with integrity who wants to take responsibility for their actions. You know, a responsible person with integrity would want to take responsibility for their actions. That's why Karen Reed asked the question, could I have hit him? And it's tragic and it's horrendous. It's so insidious how the McCabes and the Alberts and the investigators and the prosecutors ran with that. They all ran with it, and they twisted her words to make it seem like she was admitting guilt. Just so fucked up, guys. And that, guys, that's also a lesson in the Karen Reed case. That people with real integrity, people who are truly kind, people who truly have a soul in their bodies, they want to do the right thing. And the people who are corrupt and dark and nasty, they're going to exploit the people who want to do the right thing. And that's exactly what they did with Karen Reed. They exploited her because she is a good person.
Have surfaced in this third-party culpability theory. Who do you think, if John was beaten up and attacked in that house, who did it?
We don't know.
We don't know.
We don't know. And it's not for us to know. Somebody.
And maybe part of Karen Reed wants to say she knows, right? Like, maybe she wants to say she knows, but I've said this over and over again in my videos. We don't know because we weren't inside 34 Fairview. You know, yes, there are lots of theories. Yes, there are lots of corresponding factors, connections between the McCabes, the Alberts, and Michael Proctor, the MSP, and Canton PD. Remember, Kevin Albert, Brian Albert's brother, was an officer at the Canton Police Department at the time of John O'Keefe's death. Chris Albert, a board member for Canton, like, you know, like there were multiple Alberts in positions of power in this entire situation. And it's easy for anyone to just outright say it was definitely Chris Albert, Colin Albert, and Brian Higgins. That's usually the three, right? If you're paying attention to like the online consensus, those are the three that people by and large believe could have done this to John O'Keefe. Colin Albert, and Brian Higgins. But as I've said over and over again in my videos, we don't know. Yes, there are people who declare those statements as facts, that Colin Albert did this or Brian Albert did this. And they declare those statements as if they are facts, as if they know. And I get where they're coming from. But the truth is, legally, factually, we don't know, and we will never know unless someone flips. Unless someone from the McCabe family flips. Unless one of the Alberts flips. Unless someone from the Canton PD flips. Brian Higgins, you know, he could flip. But none of them are going to flip. It's so clear that they have a concrete level of solidarity amongst one another. Because they all know, guys, ultimately, they all know that this is murder. And if you assist in the crime of murder in any way, you get the same exact level of charges as the person who committed the murder. You see? So they are all being silent. They are all choosing to lie to protect one another and to protect their own asses.
Other than Karen, somebody other than Karen is responsible for that, for the killing of John. But who it was specifically, others know, and they're not talking.
What is the most...
And again, guys, like if someone commits a murder and you are there witnessing them committing that murder, you will also be charged for that murder. Okay? That's another reason why none of them are speaking. They don't want to go down for this.
important piece of evidence that exists in this case that people could look at and say, hey, there's no way that she could have done this? Is there one thing?
To me, there is. That the only physical evidence connecting me to where John's body was found, which I will not call the crime scene, the only physical evidence, pieces of plastic taillight, were not found until after the state police had possession of that very taillight.
And when you couple that, you're looking for one thing. When you couple that with the testimony of the experts, the third party, absolutely qualified experts, that there was no car accident. The car did not hit John, and John was not hit by a car.
So the taillight pieces, when they were found and when your car was taken, to you, that is the most crucial element of your defense.
It's closely followed by other evidence, but to me, yes.
You've had a
And, you know, I agree with Karen Reed, but there's also the cell phone data, the cell phone extractions, which again, Richard Green verified using hash values. There's also Nicholas Guarino saying that Karen Reed's cell phone connected to John O'Keefe's Wi-Fi at 12:36 a.m. That statement from a Massachusetts State Police trooper, Guarino, exonerated Karen Reed in and of itself. That statement alone exonerated Karen Reed because, again, according to Trooper Joe Paul, Karen Reed struck John O'Keefe at 12:45. But yes, the taillights and why? The taillight pieces, why? Because the time that John O'Keefe was on the snow, he was on top of maybe 2, maybe 3 inches of snow, and they did not find taillight pieces then when the snow was more shallow, right? They didn't find the taillight pieces when there was hardly snow on the lawn. They found the taillight pieces after they had Karen Reed's SUV in their possession and after more than 20 inches of snow had accumulated on the lawn of 34 Fairview. Like, make it make sense, guys. They, as I said, they did not find the taillight pieces there. They planted the taillight pieces there.
Private investigator from the start. Is that private investigator still running down tips, and will we see any new revelations at the retrial?
Absolutely. Yeah, we have not slowed down our investigation one iota. So I expect, I'm not at liberty to say exactly what might be revealed that's new and different in the second trial, but I expect that there will be some new information that comes from our investigation as well.
People send you tips?
All the time. All the time. Yeah, the harder part is not getting the tips. The harder part is separating the wheat from the chaff. What tips are valuable enough to sort of chase down, and which just seem like we'd be chasing our tail. But no, we get tips every single day. The public is very, very interested in getting to the truth of what actually happened to John.
Absolutely. And guys, that's another element to this case. Absolutely. That the Karen Reed supporters have become investigators of themselves. Like they become investigators in their own right. And me as well, like looking into this case, looking at the court documents, reviewing all the evidence, making connections. We have all, those of us who see Karen Reed's innocence, her innocence. We've all become investigators because it's so clear that the state of Massachusetts doesn't want to do the right thing. So people from all around the world have taken the onus upon themselves to try and solve it. And I agree with Alan Jackson. There are people posting all the time on social media. I hope Alan Jackson sees this. I hope Karen Read's defense team sees this. I think they need to look into this. Like all the time, every day, all day, people are making posts tagging the Karen Read defense team or tagging Karen Read and begging them to look into something that they may have missed. So I'm saying, guys, like, it's not just science that proves Karen Read's innocence. It's also the world of onlookers following this case who have become investigators in their own right. It's also that army of supporters who are doing everything they can to figure this out as well. Like the corruption is so deep, it's so thick that it's inignorable. We can't just like look the other way, as Alan Jackson puts it. Unlike the corrupt individuals in this case who continue to look the other way, those of us who have integrity, who have a heart, who have a conscience, we cannot ignore the facts of this case. We cannot look the other way. And there are people going down rabbit holes every day because of this case. So Karen Read has the backing of science and physics, but she also has the backing of a worldwide army of supporters who have her back and are conducting their own independent forms of investigation.
Keith. Karen, it's been reported that your defense is running about $5 million. Is that correct? And how do you pay for that?
Give or take a few million. That's a back of the envelope calculation, and it's certainly no pressure put on me in any way by my attorneys. The longer this goes, the harder they work, the more time goes into it.
How do you pay for that?
Right now, I'm paying for everything entirely on the charity of supporters. People I know, former colleagues, people, many, thousands of people I don't know. I've liquidated my retirement. I've sold my home. And everything else is from supporters. And it's not a small number. It's approaching $750,000. And I hope the supporters and the donors know that this is their defense.
So just in that free Karen Read community on Facebook alone, the official Facebook group, there are, I believe, 57,000 supporters in there to date. And to date, what they've raised is almost $750,000. And as I said, when Judge Bev denied Karen Read's motion to recover expert-related expenses, the Karen Read community pulled through. Like the very day that Judge Bev denied that motion, the Karen Read community raised $13,000 within 6 hours to boot, you know? Like that's love. That's a community of people who know that Karen Read is being framed.
For marshaling this. I could early, but it's been 3 years. I've not had income. I had 2 incomes, now I have none. So I'm just incredibly grateful and appreciative. And it was funny when we launched the defense fund, which Alan helped me do logistically through his firm. I was thanking donors the early days, anything sizable or even small ones, because it's not the nominal amount. It's what people can afford or their intention, and especially from strangers. And I was thanking people, and now I can't, but I just want them to know. I see them all. my family members, my close friends see them, and other supporters see. Our defense fund page has kind of become its own social media that people look to see what other parts of this country are people closely following and donating to this defense. So it's keeping us going financially, of course, but also emotionally.
It's important to know, not to interrupt, Ted, but it's important to know that although the attorney time involved is in the multi-million-dollar range, probably $6 million between Mr. Yannetti, myself, Ms. Little, other lawyers who have worked on the case, other individuals, investigators, et cetera. Most of us, all of the lawyers, are not getting paid that. We have not taken that money. We're not going to take that money. That's the value that has amassed of the legal services that's been required to mount this. We're not taking the money because she doesn't have the money. And the reason that David Yannetti is doing this, the reason that I'm doing this, the reason that Liza Little is doing this, the reason that Marty Weinberg and Bob Alessi and others are doing this is because it's the right thing to do. None of us are willing to stand by and watch her get railroaded or steamrolled by the power of the government when she did not do this.
Really good. That's so good to hear. Again, I've said it before over and over again. Karen Reed is blessed. You know, she's got someone looking out for her against this wall of blackened corruption. You know, she's got so many living guardian angels beside her to defend her because they know that it's the right thing to do. She is up against pure evil.
We have all decided as a team we will be here for as long as it takes, and we will fight as hard as it takes to make sure that the truth comes out.
You said you received $750,000 roughly in donations. Who would we be most surprised to hear who's donated to you?
I wouldn't disclose that to you, but some well-known, maybe one of the most well-known names at my former employer. But as I said, that means just as much to me as someone from Alabama who's given me $25 from her last paycheck.
Does that person's name start with an A?
No, he was, it's a he. And just a little more directly involved.
That's just good reporting. He's just going to keep asking until he figures it out.
Abby certainly has the money.
I wish, Ted. I wish. And that's not for lack of trying on my part.
The largest group of people who've donated to you are your former coworkers.
Not in volume of donors, but in proportion of the actual amount donated. About half has come from former colleagues to whom I am incredibly grateful. And it's kind of taken the sting out of no longer being a part of that world and seeing them every day and doing what I love to do, that I'm still connected, and it's a different life that I have now and a different purpose, and they're contributing to it.
And it's interesting, the perception that she's got this multi-million-dollar defense and this juggernaut defense, it's just not correct. It's not accurate. Yes, she has a very valuable defense working on her behalf, but the money that the donors and the public are providing, the money that that's being given to the defense fund is paying for the investigators, the expert witnesses, travel for the experts, hotels for the people are flying in from all over the country, and we have to account for that. A massive amount of logistics, getting people here so that they can testify, getting people here so that they can do the research. If we need to use research attorneys or other staff, that's what that's paying for. It's not paying for legal fees. None of us are taking legal fees.
For the retrial, you're facing a new special prosecutor. Who would you rather face? Is it Adam Lally, who we saw in the first trial, or is it Hank Brennan?
I don't care who I face. I have the truth. I have the best attorneys that money is not paying for. Do your worst.
What was your take on how the DA's office performed at the first trial?
how they performed. It felt like they just wore the jury down. It felt like a lot of repetition. I don't think the jurors saw the lack of injuries to John's body or his right arm for, I want to say it was week 5, but maybe it just felt like week 5 and it was week 3. They were clearly, and I understand why, belaboring insignificant points and barely touching on the biggest parts of the evidence.
Questions that they couldn't answer. They just decided the prosecution had a design. They were just going to try the case by volume instead of by validity.
Put it all out there.
Put everything out there, and the inconvenient facts that show that John O'Keefe was not killed by Karen Reed would just get buried somewhere in the middle. Our job was to tease that out, which we did.
Right. Like, remember the snowstorm? Like, it's snowing and the online community in an uproar about Adam Lally focusing so much about it snowing. And to date, recently, it was established that the prosecution is bringing on a weather expert to talk about the snow some more. When again, guys, the blizzard was not a blizzard. Again, I live in Massachusetts. When John O'Keefe's body was found on the front lawn of Brian and Nicole Albert's house on the night of January 29, 2022, it was not a blizzard. There were 2 or 3 inches of snow beneath him, if that, you know? But Adam Lally focused so much on the snow because there have been other cases in which the weather was used as a weapon. There have been other cases in which someone was murdered by being left outside to die in the cold on purpose. That's why Adam Lally wanted the jury to be distracted by the non-blizzard because he had no case.
Doesn't matter if they try to do it again. We'll do the same thing. Our job is to make sure that the truth gets out there.
I think ask your parents the same question. If you're framed, someone's got to run that, direct that. Who is that person?
I think you know who that person is. I think there's people who are enabling, and there's people who are actually moving pieces.
But is your theory that it's people inside that house, 34 Fairview, who sort of called the shots from the beginning, or someone high up in law enforcement?
I don't know the interconnections, the interpersonal relationships among these people. I have a strong personal opinion that what has motivated this persecution of me is power. There were familiarities among players that never should have happened. There's a sleeve of homicide in the Norfolk DA's office, as there is in the other counties of Massachusetts. And yet the person assigned to investigate this case, ostensibly investigate this case, lives a mile down the street from the crime scene. But I believe the players with the most influence are motivated more by power and playing God. And they're trying to play God with my life.
Not to protect.
Really well said. I agree. Really well said. Brian Albert absolutely has power here. And this was absolutely a demonstration of Brian Albert's power. And by power, I mean his ability to get other departments of law enforcement up to the MSP and Michael Morrissey to protect his ass. Absolutely. Multiple people in positions of power protecting power and protecting one another and protecting themselves.
People.
People are being protected. I don't know if the motivation was actually to protect those people, but it's a byproduct of it. I mean, there are names, and we know those names, that were hidden from me. I only knew who was in that house from the rumor mill, from people I knew in Canton, and it ended up becoming true once we pushed and filed motions and flew the team in. And 2 years later, a year and a half later, we're getting police reports of names of people that were in that house that I did not know about, or they were trying to make sure I didn't know about early in 2022.
And you can't have one without the other. You can't have a motivation to put the case on Karen Read without also being motivated to protect yourself or to protect others that are with you. It would take a real investigation, a true investigation by their own folks to reveal who is part of this. Is there one person that's behind it? I don't think so. In my personal opinion, I think it's a combination of folks. But I don't think that we're ever going to see that true investigation because the people that are in power don't want the truth.
But isn't that what the feds did?
That's ostensibly what the feds did and are continuing to do. I don't know the full contour of what the federal investigation is revealing, but I can certainly say that, to Karen's point, there were people that were never disclosed to us in any reports being in that home that weren't revealed until the federal investigators got involved and some folks started getting cornered. They realized, oh, hang on, I can't suppress this anymore. There are reasons why I have to now reveal this truth. And then ultimately it was revealed. Why is that? Why were folks being hidden from us in police reports, et cetera, as being in the house, as being pertinent to this investigation? They didn't do anything. Who the hell cares?
Do we know who all those people are now?
Now
were they
we
all
do.
part of the first
We
trial?
think we do.
Yeah, at least we think we do.
And by the way, Ted,
Really good for Karen Read to say that. We think we do. Yeah, we don't really know who was inside 34 Fairview that night. Like, we really don't know for sure. We know those who admitted to being there. We know those who pretended they weren't there, but we later found out were really there, right? But there could also be other individuals who were there, whom to this day were successfully hidden from the public view, right? Again, like Kevin Albert, who is Brian Albert's brother, and Kevin Albert worked for Canton at that time. He worked for the Canton PD. He could have been inside the house. Chris Albert, also Brian Albert's brother, Canton board member, he could have also been inside the house, even though he said he was not, right? Like, I'm saying there are more than likely people who were there who were successfully hidden from the rest of us. We will never know that they were there unless somebody fesses up, unless someone flips. So good on Karen Read to say, like, we think so. Yeah, because it's still, at this point, we can't trust anything anyone said who was inside 34 Fairview. They have all proven themselves to be liars, and at a rather psychopathic level.
I think it's probably half of the people that were in 34 Fairview, half of what we think the total number is, were interviewed for the first time with their defense attorneys, with their criminal defense attorneys. What a luxury. What a luxury. Some were interviewed in the first week of this case, the week following John's murder, in their attorneys' homes. Others were interviewed the fall of 2023 in their defense attorneys' offices. Convenient, and what a luxury.
And I've never seen that before either. You were talking earlier about things that are anomalous, an anomaly about this case. I've never seen that before, where like the entire panoply of eyewitnesses, supposedly eyewitnesses for the government, they all lawyer up immediately. They're all interviewed with lawyers sitting there. Why? If you're just telling the truth, what do you need to lawyer up for?
Do you think it's just because of the exposure of this case, though?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think it's self-preservation.
Will you bring any new witnesses to the retrial? Will we see anyone new at the retrial from your side?
I think a lot of that depends on what we get from the Commonwealth. We're still waiting to get the full bucket of information that the Commonwealth is amassing for the second trial. But as soon as they let us know what their witness list looks like, then that will dictate in no small part what our witness list is going to look like. But I fully expect there will be some
They're in the
new
bullpen.
witnesses. Yeah, we're not waiting on that. We're pretty good at figuring out that we can telegraph their punches. So we have not been sitting on our hands. I can put it that way. And will you see new faces? Yes, I expect you will.
We're 3 years removed from what happened, and you said that you're still receiving important evidence from the state. Why wouldn't have that been turned over for the first trial?
Because it's exculpatory.
That's the question we've been asking. Why wasn't this turned over during the first trial? And you probably will see that question posed in a formal motion that we will have before the court, before the trial starts. Because that's the right question to ask. Why the hell? You've been prosecuting this case for 3 years. We should have had every scrap of information available to you in our possession before the first trial. We have now learned that did not happen.
Karen, can you give me an example of something that you haven't?
Right. I think Alan Jackson's about to comment. But and as I've said in plenty of videos, there were multiple discovery violations. I've stressed that discovery is supposed to be concluded before trial even begins. And for anyone who doesn't know what discovery is, it's the process right before trial in which both sides, the defense and the prosecution, or the plaintiff and the defendant, exchange evidence, and they agree on the evidence they are going to put into the case, into the trial, into the hearing. That's the discovery stage that everyone goes through, whether it's civil, criminal, or family. And it's supposed to be concluded before the hearing, before the trial even begins. And that did not happen in the Karen Reed case. That's why they're still receiving evidence 3 years later. And as well as the other violations, the Brady violations. And again, for those who don't know what a Brady violation is, it's when one side intentionally withholds or destroys evidence that could exonerate or aid the other side in their argument. And that was also done to Karen Reed. So there were discovery violations and there were multiple Brady violations. And all of those violations were in the favor of the prosecution. And it was abuse. It was abuse toward Karen Reed. The prosecution in this case has had evidence proving Karen Reed's innocent. And instead of providing it and shutting themselves down and dismissing this case altogether, the prosecution chose to hide, destroy, or manipulate that evidence so that the prosecution could win their case. I've said it over and over again. For the prosecution, for Michael Morrissey, this is not about doing the right thing. This is about winning, even though he is wrong.
Nope.
Well, the CPD video was just publicized. It's in a
this isn't the place to talk about it. We're about to have a hearing on it. So I'd rather just.
This isn't going to air though till after.
But she'll probably be not deciding.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, exactly. She might not decide it for weeks or months. So I'd rather defer that question.
You've asked the state's highest court to intervene and essentially dismiss the murder charge. How closely do you follow the decisions that come out every day from that court?
We pretty much take the pulse of that docket every day. Mm-hmm. We're very interested. We think that we have nothing but the deepest respect for the SJC. One of the beauties of the appellate court process is that the more elevated the courts go, the less associated they are with the sort of the local issues that are attendant to a particular prosecution, a particular courtroom, a particular subject matter. So they're by design supposed to be elevated to a point where they can just look at something antiseptically, look at it legally and factually, and make a decision. We're looking very, very forward to the SJC reviewing, ultimately making a decision about, and then coming out with a holding concerning the acquittal of Karen on count 1 and count 3, the murder charge and the leaving the scene with injury charge. And when they do come out with that holding, my hope is that it's in our favor. It should be in our favor.
So this was clearly, this interview was clearly before the SJC made their decision. So the SJC denied Karen Reed's motion to dismiss counts 1 and 3. And the way in which attorney Alan Jackson described it is accurate. The SJC, the Supreme Judicial Court, an appellate court, is supposed to be removed from the Superior Court because the Supreme Court is supposed to oversee the decisions made in the lower courts, like the Superior Court. But as we all witnessed, all the SJC did was copy and paste Judge Bev's arguments. The SJC did not operate in their decision like a separate entity apart from the Superior Court. The SJC behaved and operated as if they are friends with Judge Beverly Cannoni. Okay? The way in which Alan Jackson described it is how it's supposed to be, right? But this is still Massachusetts, and I am sure Alan Jackson was taken aback when he learned that the SJC denied that motion, and that in their denial, all they did was copy and paste Judge Bev's own words, completely backing her up and defending her decisions, and not doing the job that an appellate court is supposed to do.
Believe legally that it will be in Karen's favor, and that will change the complexion of the second trial significantly.
Karen, aside from the DA's office dropping the charges against you, which is not going to happen, is the SJC decision your best hope?
If the SJC rules in our favor, that'd be a big win. But day to day, Ted, we don't plan on that. Hope for the best, expect the worst. One benefit to the SJC, to the appeal, to the affidavits submitted on behalf of the jurors that reached out to Alan and David, is it will hold a magnifying glass over the verdict, over the governing of the jurors, the logistics of it. So that's something we weren't expecting at the first trial. Things that were going on with the jury. We had issues with the verdict slip at the 11th hour. So this has helped us sort that out in advance of the second trial. So it has served a purpose, even if it's not the best outcome with the SJC.
So the jurors that came forward said that they found you not guilty on second-degree murder.
And you know, guys, it's a really good point to make that because the Supreme Judicial Court of Suffolk County in Massachusetts is telling the world that Judge Beverly Cannoni of the Superior Court of Norfolk County in Massachusetts didn't do anything wrong when she denied Karen Reed's motion to dismiss. Then it's like on the surface, it's giving Judge Bev credibility. But again, we all know, those of us paying attention to the facts objectively, unlike the Supreme Court, we all know that the SJC's backing and defending of Judge Bev does not make Judge Bev more credible. It just makes the SJC corrupt. Anyone willing to defend the corruption in Judge Bev's decision and her mishandling of this case, and her dictating of facts in this case, in her outright violation of rules of criminal procedure in this case, we all know that she is corrupt. So if the Supreme Court wants to defend her corruption, the Supreme Court is also corrupt, to many of us observing.
But they were stuck on manslaughter. Why is that? Why do you think that there were people in that box that said, no, we believe Karen struck John?
Actually, I believe, and part of this is a little guesswork and filling in blanks, but the jurors that came forward indicated that they weren't actually even stuck on manslaughter. They were stuck on a subordinate charge beneath manslaughter, which means by definition, they were instructed you have to find not guilty on manslaughter to even go to a subordinate charge. So as it stands, as we sit here today, the information that we have is that she was acquitted on count 1, acquitted on count 3, acquitted on the upper charge of count 2, and they were stuck on something lesser like a DUI or DUI with injury or something like that.
But that
Because of the BAC level in Karen Reed's blood, her alcohol level, which again, I don't trust. How is it fair that only Karen Reed's blood alcohol level was tested, but no one else's alcohol level was tested that day? Not a single other person had to be tested for their alcohol level, right? Just Karen Reed. So, and I've said it in earlier videos, I do not trust whatever test results they had for Karen Reed's alcohol level. I don't. And it sucks that the jury were stuck on that because according to the prosecution, Karen Reed was drunk and driving, but it's not the truth. If we look at the facts, she had more control of that vehicle than anyone in 34 Fairview had control of their integrity. And John O'Keefe, a Boston police officer, appointed Karen Reed as his designated driver, for a reason. He trusted her to get him from point A to point B safely, right? So to me, the alcohol level is likely a lie, just like every other piece of evidence the prosecution has is a fucking lie. But it sucks that the jury members got stuck on the alcohol level because it is a piece of evidence the prosecution provided, and the jury members almost couldn't ignore it.
would still mean that there were people in that box who thought Karen hit John.
I think that I don't think so, Ted. I don't believe that that's true. I believe that there were people, I think that we dispatched that notion in trial to the nth degree. I don't believe that there were actually jurors in the box who believed that the Commonwealth had proved beyond any and all reasonable doubt that she struck John with her car. I think what they thought was there is a tragic situation, a tragic outcome. A man lost his life, and that is tragic. It's deeply tragic for John, his family. And that there was drinking going on, drinking by Brian Albert, drinking by Brian Higgins, drinking by Chris Albert, everybody, including Karen Reed. And she's the one on trial. Given the fact that there was drinking going on and someone lost their life, I think that there were certain people on the jury who just decided, I don't want to say not guilty across the board. Let's find something lesser to see if we can do something to close that loop for John O'Keefe. I don't think it had really, intellectually, anything to do with Karen Reed actually striking John O'Keefe.
Karen, would you like to see this case tried somewhere else? Moved out of Norfolk County, moved out of Massachusetts?
I'm not afraid of this case being tried in Norfolk County. I'm agnostic.
In terms of picking...
Wow. Amazing. Karen Reed is a badass. She's not afraid of Adam Lally. She's not afraid of Hank Brennan. She says, do your worst. And if given the opportunity to have the case in another district, another county, she's like, it doesn't matter. I'm okay staying in Norfolk County. I'm okay staying in the lion's den. Let them try to eat me alive. I have so much respect for this woman. She's facing demons. She's facing hell on earth, and she's willing to battle it out in their domain. That is bravery. That is courage, you know? She's got more balls than anybody inside 34 Fairview.
A jury for the next trial. I mean, it was a challenge the first time around. How the heck do you do it this time?
We're not looking for jurors that haven't heard about the case. That's going to be impossible. We're looking for jurors that haven't formed an opinion about the case, which is possible. And they may have, I know there are people in the jury pool that have maybe heard about the case tangentially or know my face or passed by it on the dial, but don't really know the evidence. I'm optimistic that those people exist and they'll hear the evidence and they'll see the truth. But I believe people in Norfolk County, I've seen it, and I'm not from Norfolk County. I didn't live there. I wasn't raised there, but they're smart and savvy and they're passionate. And when they do hear about the case, most of my supporters, I would guess, are from Norfolk County proportionately, and they're intelligent. They see this for what it is by following the evidence really closely. So I just need jurors that'll do that. I haven't done it yet, but will be willing to do that.
You've spoken at length about this case and the circumstances that have happened. Why not take the stand?
I am not saying that I am not taking the stand. I felt confident in our case, in our defense, because a lot of our case was our cross-examination of these witnesses. And we made a game time decision, and I take the advice of my attorneys, but I'm not afraid of taking the stand. And I'm clearly not afraid of speaking, but I will not assign any genuine, truthful intentions to the prosecution. And I've already seen signs there, you know, they're playing hardball. So we'll weigh the pros and cons, and we'll make another second game time decision.
Do you think that this is personal for the DA's office, that they want a conviction more than probably any conviction they've ever gotten before?
Yes.
And there are certainly people involved with the prosecution who want exactly that. I would venture to say there's not a single person in the Commonwealth at the prosecution level. I don't think there's a single person at the investigative level with the law enforcement who actually believes in their heart that they can prove this case against Karen beyond any and all reasonable doubt. I don't think that there's a soul at the prosecution involved with the prosecution that believes that. Not a soul. I believe this is more a trial of a vendetta, of personal animus, of trying to save face. I don't think anybody there, honestly, put him down, strap him to a lie detector. Do you think you can prove this case beyond any reasonable doubt that Karen Reed did this? Nope, I don't think so. I think there's a lot of personal interest and personal animus that has gotten in the way of the prosecution and the Commonwealth doing their duty, their sworn duty, not to prosecute someone unless they believe they can do so to a jury, an objective jury of her peers, beyond a reasonable doubt. I don't think any one of them think that.
Really good for Alan Jackson to comment about that they all know, they're all intelligent enough, those who persist in the prosecution of Karen Reed, they all know that she did not do this. They all know it. And if they want to say they don't know it, they are lying to themselves. To me, Michael Morrissey is a key player here because he's on top of the pyramid, right? Like, he can choose to prosecute Karen Reed or to drop the case entirely, but he is choosing to persist in the prosecution of Karen Reed. And to me, Michael Morrissey has proven to me that this is a power display for him. It's a display of his limitless power. And to me, Michael Morrissey has been in power too long, so much that he believes he is the power, and he believes his power can supersede anything. This is about Michael Morrissey's ego. He wants to win because he thinks he is powerful enough to win. Again, it's not about doing the right thing. It's not about doing a prosecutor's job like he's supposed to. It's just about winning. It's a dick measuring contest for people like Michael Morrissey. He just wants to win. It is about power. It is about his ego. It's absolutely personal for Michael Morrissey. He doesn't want to be the loser that we all know he is.
Karen, is it your understanding that nobody in the Norfolk DA's office would try this case, and that's why they went to Hank Brennan?
We've heard rumors to that effect, and it was from some of the same people that told us Hank Brennan was being recruited within weeks of the mistrial. So I lend some credence to those rumors, but they're just rumors. And also, no one in the DA's office is trying this case for the retrial.
This case has become your idea.
I love her. I love the whimsical humor with Karen Reed, that despite all this bullshit and fuckery, she can still have a sense of humor. She can still smile. Again, that this woman is strong, you know, and we could all learn a lot by just observing how she prevails amidst the corruption.
Identity. Is that for the rest of your life, or will one day you just want to put it all behind you?
I don't think I can, even if I wanted to, and I'm okay with that. It's more important, this fight, than anything I've done by a wide margin, and it's made me realize that this happens all the time. And I'm just fortunate enough to be able to fight back. But what's happened to me has happened too easily, too swiftly, with seemingly no checks and balances other than the ones we can bring, that this can't be the first, it can't be the first time. And it's 2025 in Massachusetts, and it's happening right before everyone's eyes. It's hiding in plain sight. So this is a problem that I hope I'm here to address. And even if I'm not, it will be addressed. We're doing it right now. Regardless of the outcome, which will be an acquittal, eyes have been opened. That's why Alan and I are sitting here, is there's interest, and people are evaluating their law enforcement and their elected officials and their district attorneys with a more critical eye than they were before. And that's a bigger impact and a purpose that I could have, even if it's been very, very difficult for me and the people that are closest to me.
Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful for her to have that perspective. And I have argued over and over again in videos that if this is happening to Karen Reed, someone with resources, you best believe it has happened and is continuing to happen against people with far less resources. Karen Reed just said she's fortunate enough to be able to fight back. And that's because she's got resources, and the high profile nature of this case allows her to have a following in which people are willing to donate thousands to her within hours, you know? Like, it's sad to think about. It's angering to think about. Like I've said over and over again, how many other Karen Reeds are in prison right now in the state of Massachusetts, you know, that we don't even know about, men and women that we don't even know about. We don't know their names because they didn't have the resources that Karen Reed has. Their case did not get the high profile status that Karen Reed's case has. You know, again, I have so much respect for Karen Reed. to be able to be humble enough to have those perspectives, like to have that perspective. Like, she is humble and strong and courageous. And she's absolutely correct. There are others in prison right now or currently being prosecuted right now in Massachusetts because they don't have the resources to fight back. And Massachusetts is exploiting the hell out of them.
Something that the prosecution has recently been focused on were calls you made to your mother overnight. What were those calls about?
Anyone who spent any time with me throughout my life knows I'm incredibly close to my parents. And I was very troubled to put it, you've heard the voicemails. It was a blizzard. There were young children unattended. And John, uncharacteristically, and when I say uncharacteristically, I mean he's never done that before at that hour in those conditions. And I was panicked. I was torn between, did something go wrong, or is he purposely ignoring me and taking advantage of me to go home to the kids while he stay out drinking? And as I do, and do I wish I did it less? Yes, but now I need her more than ever. As I normally would do, I'd reach out to my mother for, what do you think's happening? And I, reach out to them every day now that that night just, it's like I never woke up from it. So
I think the fact that the prosecution seems to be focusing on those calls and trying to wrap Karen's parents into this just shows a level of desperation that shows or suggests that the prosecution understands how thin, paper thin, chiffon thin their case is. They can't prove this case, and so they're just sort of desperately looking to scattershot other information to make innuendo about why would she call her mother. Like, she calls her parents all the time. There's no.
And anyone else who's close to their parents, I understand plenty of people don't speak with their parents or don't speak with the one or one parent or the other. But when you are close with your parent, you are absolutely calling your parent when there's a crisis in your life. And during that night, Karen Reed felt like she was in a crisis. John O'Keefe and she were already on shaky ground. Remember the Aruba vacation, all that drama? Like, they hardly recovered from it. In fact, there are messages from John O'Keefe asking Karen Reed, I already apologized. Like, I don't want to keep rehashing it. Like, they were already on shaky ground. And then the night of the 28th into the 29th, like, she's trying to get a hold of him. She's trying to figure out what the game plan is. He's not responding to her. She's waiting for hours. And the longer she's waiting, the angrier she's getting, because he never does this. He never just outright ignores her like this. And, she's fuming at some points when she's calling him and leaving voicemail messages. Like, I'm saying, like, I can put myself in her shoes. Plenty of other people can put themselves in her shoes. She's thinking the worst, and she's certainly not thinking he's dead. She's thinking he's cheating on her. He's having fun. He's taking advantage of her. He's left her with his niece and nephew, whom he is responsible for. Like, she was only supposed to be his DD. Karen Reed was only supposed to be his designated driver. And how is she going to do that if he's not responding to her? Like, how is she supposed to pick him back up if he's not responding to her? And some people get really fucking wild when they're drunk. Some people will go out and walk in the snow in a blizzard if they're too drunk, because that's how intoxicated they are. They have no frame of reference. They're so out of their minds, out of sobriety, that they make stupid decisions. It happens all the time with alcohol. Alcohol is still one of the leading causes of death in the US to date, People do crazy fucking shit when they're drunk. Shit they can't control because they're drunk. So of course Karen Reed is livid. She's angry. She's worried. She's a combination of all of that. And anyone who is feeling that way and is close to their parent is going to call their parent to let off some of that steam, to unload, to get another perspective, you know, to grasp some sanity. You know, I don't see it as anything nefarious or guilty at all. It's perfectly human to call your parent when you're having trouble, when you are in a situation that you are angry and upset and worried about.
They're there. Doesn't mean that the prosecution isn't going to look and make suggestions about it, but it's a desperate ploy, and there's nothing there.
What would surprise me or the people watching this about something that's transpired over the last 3 years?
I don't think so. I think one of the things that we've tried to do on the defense team from the beginning is pull that veil back, pull the curtain back, and show all the warts and blemishes of the Massachusetts State Police, the Canton Police Department, the investigative techniques that they used or didn't use, the Commonwealth's prosecution of a case like this. We wanted everybody to see everything. And we were pretty successful in that in terms of the presentation in front of the first jury. We intend to do it again in front of the second jury. So the thing that's most shocking is the full universe of information that now the community has in front of it. We have gotten call after call after call, email after email, text after text from community members who don't know us, certainly don't know me, I'm from California, saying, this kind of thing happened to my family, this kind of thing happened to me, this kind of thing happened to my son, this kind of thing happened to my father, my mother. And nobody would ever look at it. Nobody would believe us. Nobody would listen. Thank God you folks have found the platform to show what actually is happening in our community. That's what has been most surprising, and it's there for everybody to see.
What is your relationship with Adam Lally and Hank Brennan? Is it cordial?
There's no relationship.
I mean, you have to deal with them back and forth.
Not her.
Not me.
Okay. Your relationship with Hank Brennan?
Completely professional.
Okay.
Cordial, civil, professional. And that's all I expect. If he's going to prosecute this case, the only thing I expect from him is professionalism, which he has given me. It doesn't get, at least with me and with David and with Liza, it doesn't get personal. We deal with what we need to deal with in the courtroom.
Was that the same way with Adam Lally?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, by and large. I disagree vehemently, vigorously with their prosecution of this case. Yeah. They know that. I haven't made that, that is out there. But in terms of just day-to-day interaction, I expect the highest level of professionalism from them, and they get it from us.
It's business.
It's business.
State police.
Yeah, except for when Hank Brennan agreed to coordinate with Canton PD so that Karen Reed's DVR expert could fly out from Arizona to Massachusetts to inspect the DVR system at the Canton PD. Yeah, Hank Brennan, to me, he did that maliciously. How are you going to agree to accommodate the defense team's DVR expert, but not relate to the defense team that in your accommodation there was nothing in the DVR system, and Hank Brennan could say he didn't know, he could be innocent in that one little bit, but for him to just outright say, we don't owe the defense team anything because neither of us knew what was in the DVR system. But by the way, I was able to get a hold of a retired detective who worked for Canton PD, and he's got the DVR footage in his iCloud, if you guys want it. Like, where was that before the guy flew from Arizona to Massachusetts? In the process of accommodating the defense team's DVR expert, Hank Brennan never knew that the retired detective at Canton PD had the full DVR extraction on an iCloud. That information only came up conveniently after the defense team's DVR expert flew back to Arizona. I'm just saying, like, Hank Brennan has been playing dirty from the moment he entered this case. And he knows all the facts, but he is still choosing to prosecute an innocent woman. Hank Brennan cannot be trusted. And even though Alan Jackson says their correspondences have been professional, to me, Hank Brennan agreeing to coordinate with the DVR expert on behalf of the defense team, and only disclosing to the defense team that the full DVR extraction was available somewhere else after the defense expert makes that $12,000 trip. You know, it's not coincidence. It's not just a mishap. It's Hank Brennan continuing to play dirty. That's my perspective. I could be wrong, but this is Hank Brennan.
Have had people follow your drivers?
Yep. Our drivers have been approached by the state police. They're no longer some are no longer my drivers because of that. I've had very close friends, had their cell phone records subpoenaed for an indictment that never happened. There's a lot of attempts to glean more about our team by the state police. There's probably, I wouldn't put it past them to something's going on as I'm sitting here.
Have you ever been followed?
I don't know. My eyes are akimbo all the time. I look at law enforcement differently, more warily. I don't know that I'm being followed. I've been tracked. I mean, I've been tracked on flights. I've been tracked when I've stayed in hotels. This is in.
How do you know you're being tracked?
I know from affidavits from the state police at the Norfolk DA's office when they were investigating me last year. I was with my closest friend trying to get away from Massachusetts, and little did I know at the time, I learned about it afterwards, that they knew what flight I was on, they knew when I landed, they knew when I came back, and it's disturbing. It's invasive, and it's desperate.
Getting back to sort of just distilling, what is the one thing in this case that you believe proves your innocence?
John's body, no bruise, 6,000-pound full-size SUV, not a bruise on his body, not a fracture below his head.
The medical examiner did not rule his death a homicide, correct?
Correct.
Was it undetermined?
Yes.
And that doesn't get revisited, correct?
Oh, good luck.
Yeah.
Good luck trying to revisit that. I don't think it'll be revisited by her. I mean, she came to the decision of. Right. So I don't think she's not gonna, and if she does deviate from that decision, she's gonna have to answer for that. And that will be an incredibly uncomfortable situation. I don't think that will happen. But it's very telling that their own best expert, as it pertains to the physical evidence surrounding John and John's injuries, did not rule this a homicide. And they have the burden of proof. That's one of the galling factors in this entire thing, is the Commonwealth knows that their own expert or experts will not support their prosecution of Karen. Then dismiss the case. Do the right thing. Just do the right thing. And it's shocking that they won't.
John's niece and nephew, who he was taking care of, essentially testified against you in the trial. How hard was that?
I knew that was coming because I read what they testified to in the initial indictment almost 3 years ago. And they're part of a well that was poisoned almost as soon as he died. And they were 3 years younger then and impressionable and surrounded by adults that care for them and provide for them. And I was no longer one of those adults. And it's unfortunate, and I hope and wish for the best for them, but I've long come to terms with what's happened to the children.
Has Paul O'Keefe ever made any statements to you walking by or anything?
He sends me, he hasn't in a while, but he's attempted to send me Facebook messages. It's ironic because there's a stay away order, and yet I hear, they've attempted to send me messages, and as soon as I see the name comes up, I just delete it. I'm not interested in anything he has to say to me.
What do you think might be the tenor of those messages?
Negative, volatile. I mean, there was some volatility in court, and I think I'd attribute the same cause to Paul's emotions as I would to the children's.
Can you feel him staring at you?
I honestly don't even know he's there anymore. I mean, I'm aware that his immediate family's in the courtroom, but there's days, we come home from hearings or we came home from court, and someone close to me will say, was that so-and-so on the O'Keefe side? And I said, I honestly, I almost look through them at this point. I know they're there, and my family would be there. My family is there. But the O'Keefe's presence, Paul sitting there, doesn't impact me, it doesn't bother me. That's John's brother. But I couldn't tell you from one day to the next what color shirt he was wearing.
If you were
That is awesome. That is brilliant. So just to comment on what she said about the niece and nephew, it's sad, guys, but this happens to children in divorce cases too, where one parent is feeding the children lies about the other parent. And when the children are impressionable, they tend to believe those lies. Children are so impressionable, and they are often in the middle of bullshit between adults, whether it's divorce, whether it's custody battles, and the adults who plant seeds into children's brains about other people just because the adults want to project their issues onto children. Those are the worst kinds of human beings among us. Absolutely. So if there were people feeding false information to John O'Keefe's niece and nephew in a way to say Karen Reed did this, and we all know she did, even though factually she did not, all those adults, again, are going to hell. They're going to have to face God or the higher power at some point. You don't bring children into your bullshit ever. And the right thing would have been to protect the niece and nephew from this entire ordeal. To say, we don't know what happened, but we're going to let the science figure it out. And when you actually listen to the science, you can say Karen Reed didn't do this, and you can communicate that to the children. But unfortunately, like Karen Reed was saying, the well was poisoned. And it is so often poisoned when children are surrounded by adults who don't do the right thing. Selfish adults who project their own unresolved issues, their own unresolved psychopathy onto children, onto those who don't know any better. It's a coward's game when people do that, but also to comment on what Karen Reed was saying, that she doesn't even know the color shirt Paul O'Keefe is wearing when he's sitting a mere 2 feet away from her on purpose, as he so consistently does, depending on the courtroom at the Superior Courthouse. Paul O'Keefe absolutely does that. He sits closely to Karen Reed to intimidate her. He absolutely does. And if I were his wife, much like if I were Michael Proctor's wife, I would be disgusted by these men, that they can't get their facts straight and they are running on hatred. Michael Proctor and Paul O'Keefe are both running on pure hatred. So I commend Karen Reed for getting to the point that she is paying them no mind. Paul O'Keefe will keep sitting there, keep trying to intimidate Karen Reed, keep trying to put the blame on her for something she didn't do, you know, and it's a waste of his time. It's a waste of Paul O'Keefe's energy because it isn't doing a damn thing for Karen Reed, you know? Like, how does that feel, Paul O'Keefe? All your hatred is all for naught. And if you would just stick to the facts, you wouldn't look like such a fool, you know? And I made a video about Paul O'Keefe, and that video is titled, Paul O'Keefe is a Fool, and he still is. Absolutely. Get your facts straight, Paul O'Keefe. This is your brother, and he was murdered by people who don't want you to know the truth.
Aimed, who's calling the shots? You know, there's so many levels there, right? There's the troopers on the ground, there's the prosecutors, there's the DA.
That's the problem. This is just us talking, but that's the problem with answering that question or trying to narrow that question. And she can answer it whichever way she wants to, but it can't be one. It's not one person. It's just not. There's not a singular tip of the spear.
Do you want to say? Do you want to? I mean, if that's the
that is my opinion.
Yeah, anyway. I want to hear you. Obviously,
I just want to add to that. I already answered it very pointedly, but there's a garbage in, garbage out problem that forensic scientists or civilians or even local law enforcement that's assisting the investigators, their output and their determinations are only as good as what they're given, what they're testing, what they're measuring, what they're photographing. So I don't believe it's necessarily 40 different people, but I think it's garbage in, garbage out.
5, 10 years from now, where is Karen Reed? What is she doing?
I don't know what I'll be doing, but I'll be busy, whatever I'm doing. And I care and I think more about whom will I be with. And God willing, it's my parents and the people who've seen me through this. And I hope to meet more of the people that are helping to pull our team through.
Do you have the capacity to find someone new one day, or has that all just been destroyed by all of this?
No, it's not destroyed. I didn't do anything wrong. And I cared for someone and he cared for me. And it ended tragically. And tragic things happen to relationships every day, to 67 relationships, or exponential this morning or last night. So I will not be permanently broken. I'm not broken temporarily. I've just been sidelined from what I thought I was doing on this planet, and it wasn't what I thought I was supposed to be doing. But there's been no irreparable damage to me or what I want out of life or what I want to make me happy.
Did you always know that you had this strength?
I could not have known that I could deal with what I'm dealing with, but I've never been deterred by anything in my life. And I have had challenges, not quite as big as this, but health challenges that severely incapacitated me and ruined my physical quality of life. This is more of a mental obstacle now, but I'm invigorated by challenges. It makes me feel stronger to overcome things. And I think part of the reason I can adapt to this new normal I'm in is because I've had to do it before. And I've been strengthened by the events in my life that brought me to 2022.
The hundreds of thousands of people who might be watching this, what would you like to say?
I'll let him keep speaking, but I just want to say, like, that is commendable. Again, we could all learn a lot from Karen Reed. She will brave the next storm if it comes, you know? As like she said earlier, do your worst. Like, she's ready for anything. And that's such a strength that, again, so few people possess. And I hope that in observing this case and studying this case, more of us have that level of resilience, because that's truly what it takes to overcome this kind of fuckery. You have to be strong to overcome it, because the corrupt people know that if they just keep beating you down and keep feeding lies to the world about you, that eventually you're going to crumble. If you're weak, you're going to crumble, you're going to cower away, you're going to submit, you're going to give in, and you're going to give in to what the corrupt people want. But Karen Reed is wise, and she is strong, and she knows that you don't give in to people like that. You become stronger and you keep fighting.
Thank you to the vast majority of them. And like I said earlier, only people very close to me knew the truth for a very long time, living day to day without a job, without anything to really focus on but this case, and know that even my neighbors who I could see out my window didn't really know the circumstances. And to have hundreds of thousands hear this and be enlightened is just a massive relief. And the support that people who come up to me, to my family, Alan and I had a meal paid for in the North End, and it was, I don't know the last time I've done anything but tip a waiter. And that generosity, that's all helping fuel this. It helps me spiritually, and it helps me financially, and I want to thank the vast majority of those people.
Excellent interview. Again, I will leave the link to the full interview in the description below. Excellent video, and that following the free Karen Reed supporters, it's only going to keep growing. It's only going to keep growing, especially with the retrial on the way. So props to Karen Reed and to Alan Jackson and to Ted Daniels for providing this objective, insightful interview that did not whatsoever have a slant of sensationalism or, nefariousness. For once, an interview with Karen Reed that was just about the facts. Good job. Thank you for watching.